Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? The Saints are heading into this offseason looking at a lot of free agent questions. There are 18 players on this roster that are free agents, most notably among them Terron Armstead, Jameis Winston, Marcus Williams. There are some big questions that are going to be answered about this roster, and some big-name players on this roster as they move into the future and what all will be ahead. None bigger, obviously, than what's going to happen at quarterback. Do you re-sign Jameis Winston? I think that's where you start. Are you re-signing Jameis Winston? And a lot of that's going to depend on maybe some ancillary things. But remember, you're going to hit free agency before you hit the draft. So you may have to make that decision. You will have to make that decision before you get to the draft. Are you able to work a deal when the league year begins to trade for one of the free agents that's out there? Or to make it, not for a free agent, to make a trade for a player? We talked about Aaron Rodgers. We talked a lot about Russell Wilson. Some of you have mentioned, what about Baker Mayfield? Even though the Browns have publicly committed to him today, Jimmy G, or the Niners moving on with Trey Lance. All of those are very real questions that need to be out there. I guess out of obligation, I could mention Deshaun Watson, but realistically, I don't think that the Saints have enough draft capital to be able to trade for a guy like Deshaun Watson. But we'll find out in time. The other option, of course, is drafting a quarterback. And as we move through this draft process, it's going to be very interesting, the pre-draft process, with things like the Senior Bowl and the Combine. It's going to be fascinating to watch which quarterbacks emerge. And it always happens. And right now, when you look at most mock drafts, you don't see a quarterback in the top 10. Somewhere in just after 10 or in the early teens is where you'll find the likes of Matt Corrall and Kenny Pickett. And somewhere along the way, you might find Malik Willis. You just don't see a glut of quarterbacks in this draft. There isn't the Trevor Lawrence, the Joe Burrow, the Kyler Murray, the Baker Mayfield, the guy that's the no doubt top of the draft, going to be the first overall pick type guy. It's not to say that they're all going to go on to great careers. It's just going into the draft process. A lot of times we know that there are certain guys that are going to be at the top of the draft. So the Saints are going to have an interesting question because they're picking at a spot in the draft at 18 where there very likely is going to be a quarterback there for them. And the question is, do you use that 18th pick to draft a quarterback of the future if that player is there and that you really like? Or do you re-sign one of Jameis Winston as a free agent, or do you make a deal for a veteran player and then you address quarterback through the draft maybe another year if you feel like there's a better opportunity? And I bring this up today because I came across a mock draft, and it was USA Today's mock draft. And there's some interesting things, some that aren't surprising at all. They've got Kayvon Thibodeau as the number 1 overall pick, Aiden Hutchinson 2 to the Lions, Evan Neal 3 to the Texans. Unfortunately, they have Derek Stingley 4th to the Jets. It's wonderful for Stingley to be 4th. Going to the Jets is disappointing, although that would put him in the media capital of the world there in New York City. But again, that also underscores essentially the same thing we saw last year with Jamar Chase, which is if you are a dynamic player, if you are a transcendent type player, it doesn't matter if you're injured or you opt out, NFL teams are going to buy you. And that's what's going to happen with Derek Stingley there. As I scroll through this draft, though, I was a little disheartened when I saw Matt Corral 11 to the Washington football team, because if there was one player, I've said many times, there's one player in this draft at quarterback that I would be willing to use a first-round pick on, it would be Matt Corral. But alas, USA Today does not have the Saints taking Matt Corral. They do, however, have the Saints taking a quarterback, and that's Kenny Pickett from Pitt. The write-up very quickly says, Sean Payton seemingly pushed New Orleans as far as it could go without some semblance of consistency at quarterback. Identifying more than a patchwork solution has to be the foremost concern this offseason, and Payton won't find a better package of experience and accuracy in the draft than Pickett. The 4-year starter's accelerating growth into a Heisman Trophy finalist highlighted that he can thrive in a scheme that helps him harness his aggressiveness. So that's a very positive write-up. But if Kenny Pickett were that good, why is he being mocked in the low teens? You see, that's the problem that I'm going to run into. And it's not to say that you can't find the guy middle or late round 1 that becomes the guy. I mean, Lamar Jackson's a great example of that. He was at the end of round 1, became an MVP. those guys are there, undeniably. But if I'm going to take a quarterback in round one, it's most likely going to be a scenario where I'm minimizing risk. And I'll say this again, and I'm going to say it a million times more between now and the draft, because I don't want there to be any confusion with where you understand my stance is on this. If the Saints decide to take a quarterback in round one, I'm good with it because I trust Sean Payton. I trust his evaluation of that position to know what he's looking for and what player can thrive in his system. I had no problem with them taking Ian Book in round 4. If that's a player that thought they had great value there and maybe could mold as a project into, look, we saw with Russell Wilson as a third-round pick who became the guy. Will Ian Book ever be that? I don't know, but I trust Sean Payton to give it a go. So if Sean Payton sees a guy in round 1 that he likes and takes him, I'm going to be okay with it because I trust Sean Payton. But this really popped into my brain because on Tuesday shows, Larry Holder was here, and we started talking about Kenny Pickett. And I pointed out the fact that Pickett really was not only not well known, but just wasn't very productive of a player in his career up until his 5th year. And he retorted with, well, what about Joe Burrow? And that's true. But Joe Burrow sat at Ohio State behind really talented players. Kenny Pickett had been playing at Pitt throughout his career. The other part of it, too, is we saw Joe Burrow's emergence lead to him being the, no doubt, number 1 overall pick in the draft. He was a transcendent player his final year at LSU that led everybody to look at him and go, yep, we want that guy. And why he became the first overall pick in the draft and why he's now leading Cincinnati to a division championship in year 2 and into the playoffs. When I look at Kenny Pickett, he's in his 5th season, and he's in his 4th year as a starter. And in this season, his 5th year, he doubled his yardage total effectively. Now, he had 160 more attempts, so he had 130 more completions. They changed their offense. They became more wide open, and naturally, you saw what happened. They threw it more, and he had more statistical success, and they as a team had more success. He's 6'3", 220, so he's a big guy with a big arm, and he's aggressive and all that stuff. And I do think that he is a winning player. But he feels more to me not like first-rounder Joe Burrow. He feels more to me like first-rounder Blaine Gabbert. He feels more to me like first-rounder Daniel Jones. He feels more to me like first-rounder Christian Ponder or Jake Locker or E.J. Manuel, the guy who has the measurables, threw for a bunch of yards, won games, and so people looked and said, yep, that's going to be our guy. And it didn't really materialize. That's where I am with Kenny Pickett. Now, there is a possibility that he could be first-rounder Josh Allen, a guy who's a big dude with a big arm who went largely unnoticed throughout his career. Remember Josh Allen? Wyoming, goes to the Senior Bowl, and just was the best quarterback there at the Senior Bowl. First-round draft pick solidified there. Now look at what he's doing there with the Bills. I mean, he had them in the AFC Championship game a year ago. So maybe that's Pickett as well. I'm just not there on Pickett. I've told you before, the one quarterback that I would be okay with the Saints taking in round 1 at this point would be Matt Corrall. His size does concern me, as we saw evidence in the Sugar Bowl. He runs, he will put his body out there, and when you're not huge, you run the risk of being injured. So that, yes, that is a concern, candidly. But I also believe he has all the intangibles, the moxie, the feeling, the leadership, all that sort of stuff, and the physical ability, arm strength, accuracy, to be a great NFL player in this modern NFL. I'm not sure if I have that with Kenny Pickett. So I need to see. He's, to me, the most fascinating player in this draft because I think it's the most important position in all of team sports. We know that. And he's a guy that really has a very small sample of elite-level play. So can you buy him continuing that progression at the next level? With Sean Payton, you could make an argument. Look, Sean Payton won with Teddy Bridgewater and won with Taysom Hill. And I mean, you could win with almost anybody out there. But can you win championships? Will you be a championship contender with him? And I'm not sold there. So this offseason, this Senior Bowl, this combine is going to be massive to watch how this all evolves as the evaluation goes with Kenny Pickett, because I think where the Saints are picking, you're going to see more mock drafts that have Kenny Pickett to the Saints at 18. And that's something we really have to start to consider and discuss, because it's a position of need, obviously. It's a player that is much talked about, that is likely going to be on the board there. And so you're going to see a lot of this conversation. So we'll be paying attention to it. Could Kenny Pickett be the Saints quarterback of the future? For me, that's a non-starter. But I'm willing to be convinced as we move through this process. We'll certainly keep our eye on it. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.